Hey everyone, you're listening to the Fierce Feminine podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Harrison from melissacatherineharrison.com. In the near decade I've been coaching powerful women, I've found one of the biggest problems we face is not trusting our intuition and acting on it enough, not trusting ourselves enough. More fulfillment, more enjoyment, and more success always follow when we trust the intuitive nudges. So what stops us, and how can we tune in more? On this show, I sit down with incredible women to discuss their take on this, examples of them following the nudges, and the strategies they take so we can all do the same and rise together. I'm so glad you're joining us. Today's guest is Becca Speert. Becca, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation.
I can't wait to hear what you have to share. Really, really good stuff. If you wouldn't mind starting us off with telling me a little bit about your personal background, maybe family of origin, hobbies, interests, anything you're comfortable sharing.
Let's see. I'm the youngest of three daughters, and I grew up in the forest. So I am just a devout lover of nature and the environment. I am a strong environmental advocate. And because I grew up in the forest and in nature, I think it's how I began to really tap into the more ethereal experiences that kids tend to gravitate towards. I was just in the space to be able to really let them enhance and be immersed in it. So I think that has a big part to do with who I am today, why I love nature, but why I'm so in touch with the unspoken world.
Oh, I love how you said that, the unspoken world. That's great. So, what has your career path been like then?
Well, I first started in art school, but started to have mysterious aches and pains all over my body, and the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong. So I left art because my craft was glass blowing and ceramics, which takes a lot of physical activity. And I ventured into geology because I love nature, and molten rocks felt similar to molten glass, is the way I describe it. Um, but as I was venturing into geology academically, that also is physically rigorous, and I didn't know that. And in the midst of my coursework, I met somebody who suggested I took a sustainable living course that was new. And that class changed my entire life. Even though I was raised by parents who composted and recycled and were very had such reverence for the environment, I didn't quite have a sense of industry and the process that things go through to get food on our plate. I didn't have a full systems awareness. And so sustainable living really turned my world around. And I realized if I was going to be a geologist, I'd be either working in academia or working in oil. And so very quickly, I decided to make my own major, which was offered at the school I went to, UMass Amherst. So I created my own major. I called it environmental and cultural sustainability. And I was able to take classes from the plant and soil science department and really weave in sustainability, but also study indigenous cultures and herbalism and nutrition and healing as well. But when I graduated, I wasn't prepared for any job. And so I was working for farms, and I actually was working for a nursing home. And so I've always kind of had one foot in the environmental world and one foot in the human services world. My mom's a social worker, my dad was a physician, so I always kind of saw that I was kind of a bridge. But I was pursuing more of the landscape design route, and God had a different plan for me. And with my health issues, I ended up leaning more towards holistic health coaching. As I was training to become a wilderness skills guide and learning permaculture design and landscape design, my health issues were getting worse. So I enrolled at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition so that I could heal my own body, because the doctors I felt were letting me down, and I felt really disconnected from my own healing experience. I felt like a test tube. So as I was pursuing that training, I realized I was really born to be a coach, with the way I'm just so naturally curious and love people and love asking questions, endless questions. I was always a kid. Still go to lectures, I'm always in the front asking too many questions. So that's how I started as a coach. It was trying to figure out my own health issues. And as I got really fatigued with my own diet and talking to other people about food and continuing education, I'm a lifelong learner, a huge advocate for lifelong learning. I took a lot of personal growth courses and spirituality development courses. And I realized I'm much more suited to be a life coach rather than a health coach. It feeds me more, and it's just where my more natural gifts are. The food stuff felt more forced and rigid and militant, really. So life coaching allowed me to weave everything into it, and the career just kind of moved as I moved and continues to evolve as my interests change and my skill set grows.
Wow. Well, thank you for
That's a
sharing.
long answer.
Well, but it really highlighted for me that you clearly honor yourself and trust yourself and go where you're being led, which I think is profound. And it really speaks to why we're talking today about trusting intuition.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you for pulling that out of the story, pulling that thread out of the story. I did write a chapter in a book at one point, highlighting a similar sentiment, which is that it seemed really disconnected, all the choices I made, and it seemed like a lot of dead ends, but they all built on one another, and I didn't see it, and still probably don't see it until the next level. And I think that just like you said, highlights what intuition can look like. It doesn't always feel clear in the moment when we're following it, if we're following it, but it ties itself together when we look back later on.
Yes, I often use the example of I was asking for an answer or just saying like, okay, I know the answer's here. I know I have the answer. What is it? And the nudge I got was, and it was like about, I don't know, like something in my business. And the nudge I got was go clean your closet. I was like, what? That doesn't make, but then of course I'm cleaning it out and I find something that relate, so right. It doesn't make sense until it's hindsight. It's always hindsight.
And it is those little funny nudges that I find sometimes bring the biggest miracles. Like all of a sudden craving to go to a grocery store that I forgot about or something. And it, takes you somewhere to run into somebody or find a product or
Always.
have like an epiphany.
Yeah.
Life is much more nuanced and complex than sometimes we can ever fully grasp.
So I know you have some insights and some things to share about your own journey with trusting yourself a little bit more, I think, than what you've shared. But if it's okay, I'd like to start with where do you feel intuition in your body? And I know for you, this is just amazing that it's a way of life for you. So I don't know if it's as pronounced as maybe for some women who are just starting to follow. But if you could speak about what it's like for you in your body, that would be great.
Mm-hmm. So I'm somebody who sees the intersection of science and spirituality and psychology all the time, and I don't see them as separate, and I don't see any of them as superior to another, although science to me does feel like it's more verified. If things are quantified and observed in a controlled way, it does feel like it holds more weight. But every day I remember that, no, the spiritual world is just as real. But we can get kind of taken away too far into the spiritual world and then lean too far into what we perceive as intuition. And then we're kind of out in no man's land and not as grounded as I think is required to be a functional person. So in answering your question, I think I've learned to tune into intuition from all those angles and not just trust one thing without the whole, if that makes sense. So even if I'm feeling a physical sensation or a more emotional sensation, I'll kind of tune into the whole picture before I give it too much credit, if that makes sense. And something I work with a lot with clients around is it intuition? Is it trauma? Is it, familiar? Is it God? And I'll never claim to have a definition or certainty in any of those circumstances, but I feel like through practice with being in that inquiry, we can more successfully and effectively make choices and listen to ourselves. So for me, it could be a physical sensation, or just probably more commonly, it's just, they call it claircognizance, just like a knowing. Right. And it's funny because bringing it back to the whole science and psychology and spiritual piece, as I was sharing with you, when you asked me some profound question, my ear started ringing. Now, a lot of New Age spiritualists will say like, oh, it means angels are talking to you, or confirmation. Or it could mean like your hormones are off. So I always take it with a grain of salt, but I find it entertaining and really coincidental and synchronistic that sometimes it will happen in a powerful conversation. So that happened. So I'm always like, maybe that means something. Maybe it doesn't. And I think um, walking through life with that kind of humility and detachment is the healthy way to do it, rather than getting so taken away by what is the meaning and trying to identify it, or claiming that we really know. So for me, it's all the above. It's the hearing things, it's the feeling things, it's sometimes just like that gut, that visceral feeling.
Yeah.
And I like to describe to people that intuition is gentle. It's not alarming. And that sometimes if we do feel disoriented, or like we go into fight or flight or some sort of trauma response, that's not the time to make a decision. And it's not necessarily a sensation to trust, other than something's up, right? Like we need to regulate, or something in our environment's not safe.
Yes. All of that was beautiful. I agree completely. I too have the psych, science, spirituality conjunction like that. That is my world as well. And um, what you said, humility and detachment, right? Those are the words you used. Spot on. Because, and I think that really speaks to knowing yourself well enough to know, like, is my ear ringing because I need to pay attention, or is it because maybe my headphones were too loud, or like you said, or like hormones or something. um but I think that comes with a lot of practice in being self-aware,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah, that's amazing. So along those lines then, how do you differentiate between fear and intuition, or
It's
trauma, like, what
yeah.
comes with trauma as well?
Um, I'd say fear and trauma is going to be sort of a reactionary thing, and it's overwhelming and it's unsettling. Whereas intuition is more of a presence it's comfortable. It's not disruptive. It's like that, like that makes sense kind of sensation, clarity. And sometimes it could make you question, right? Like it might not be clarity because it's a message, but you don't feel certain about it. But when somebody is just, leaning into making a decision from impulse, maybe impulse is also another way to describe it. If
Mm,
it's a knee jerk experience, and it isn't from it doesn't feel like a place of expansiveness, but more contraction. There's so many different ways to describe it in terms of sensation, and also in terms of just wisdom that comes hopefully from aging and experience.
right.
Right. And what I like to say to people is like, I don't teach people exactly how to do things. I try to guide them through their own experience, because if you don't have that integrated experience from your own data set, your own data collection, you're just taking other people's words for it. And then it actually isn't true wisdom and knowledge. So getting people into the surrendered orientation to receive information, to observe oneself, and then through trial and error and repetition, it begins to, you begin to just figure it out based on having gone through it.
Yes. Yeah, 1,000,000%, yes. So what does that surrendered orientation look like for you? Surrender is so huge, and I think a lot of people misunderstand what it actually means. So
Mhm.
what's that like for you in your own practice?
In my own practice, I'd say that it looks like no rush.
Mm.
I think so
Interesting.
many people are in a rush. It looks like receptivity in terms of um, not coming to a decision or conclusion based on immediacy, but through patience and observation and letting things fall where they may. Sometimes we need more information, or we need to have more conversations, or we need more time to pass. So until getting to a place of having gathered the right information, or feeling sure about something, or ready for something, right? Because we're not always sure in life, but we can feel ready, or know it's time to
Mm,
take a position, or time to make a decision.
yes.
So surrender is more from that paced and mindful methodology, and also comfort in limbo, or comfort in the discomfort, comfort in not having come to an agreement yet, or not having made a decision yet, or something not having come to fruition yet, but contentment, peace, stability, regulated nervous system.
Yes. And so being able to be present in the moment with whatever has arisen, right? Like you said, it does require a certain level of regulation. So what's your take on how people who are either still caught in trauma responses or even just in the hustle culture
Mhm.
that we're exposed to, what's your take on how best to navigate like the moment and just being with whatever's present?
Well, one of the hardest things I feel like we have to face today, myself included, is how much screen time we're invited to expose ourselves to, and the addiction that comes from exposure, and
Yes.
recognizing how much that hijacks people's nervous system, and monitoring how much time we're engaging with it, noticing the response we're having to it, and then deciding if we're going to let that be our lifestyle or not. Um, and if we are exposed to that, how can we te- how can we is temperate the right word? How can we counteract it? Adding in more relaxation, adding in more mindfulness.
Mm.
I already lost track of your question, even thinking about screen time. So can you repeat that question?
And you did answer it to an extent, so thank you. How we can overcome the fact that we are either in trauma response or part
Mhm.
of hustle culture,
Yeah.
and so much of that keeps us away from the present moment. Like we're always looking to
Yeah.
escape the present moment, right? Like,
And that's how powerful it is, at least for me. Like, even thinking about social media just like got me distracted
yeah,
from the
yeah.
question, which was the question in essence. Um, and so, something that also is really enmeshed in our culture is codependency.
Hmm.
And social media, I think part of what makes it so effective is people's desire for connection, desire for validation, and then the chemical reactions that happen when we're getting all these dopamine hits.
Oh.
Um, so social media is the epitome of hustle culture, like scrolling and posting and all
Mhm.
this stuff, and proving and validating and need. So one is, please just try to limit that. I mean, I'm speaking to myself too. I've really
Oh, yes.
started to pull out of social media in increments, and
Hmm.
trying to figure out how to go back to old school ways of networking, and
Yeah.
building my practice outside of screen time. Um, but first identifying our place in it, our own experience with it, our own needs. What does it look like for us to have a healthy lifestyle? Who are we as individuals? Because everyone has a different capacity and bandwidth. I noticed myself, I'm super sensitive to it.
I just want to highlight what you just said, that we all have our, and I'm going to butcher it, but essentially we all have our unique bandwidths, our
Mhm.
own unique ways of needing things and perceiving the world, and those need to be honored. And I think we still get caught in, oh, but she does it like this, so I should be able to do it like this. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to, that's just so important. I love that you said that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And something that is also interesting to me is how the algorithm works and feeds us more of what we've already seen.
Yeah.
So as a coach, I'm exposed to all these coaches, and I go on social media and all I'm seeing is like coach industry. And then I think everyone else is seeing that. And I don't want to be immersed in that. So I literally need to delete my accounts and start fresh, or just pull out altogether, or mess with the algorithm in other ways. But um that's not the lifestyle I want to live. I don't want to be in this marketing cycle. And I'm not sure what other people are seeing. I think some people are probably seeing only gardening stuff coming through, and lucky them. Um, but really getting clear about what social media is and isn't. And it is this huge money making thing, and they're tracking us. And, people used to think that those that were talking about that decades ago were conspiracy theorists. It couldn't be more real. I started Facebook in 2004 because I was at UMass Amherst, and I think Facebook started in 2003 at Harvard, and then they went to UMass Amherst next. And it was a way different platform, like it has nothing to do with what it is today, but it was already starting to get its claws in me and become part of my daily life. So it's very strange to start to pull out of it decades later. But to your point about hustle culture, and what was the other piece you mentioned?
Trauma, because it's like
Trauma.
that instant
Yeah.
reaction.
Yeah. So these cravings, right? Like, where are they coming from? And what does it say about society? And what does it say about our own lives that we're wanting something through the screen rather than cultivating that in our real physical life?
Yeah, it's often a lot easier to, I don't want to say pretend, but to act as though it's super important to be informed on social media, or for those of us who rely on social media marketing as part of
Mhm.
our, business growth, to make it seem like it's more important rather than having the real conversations we need to be having
Yeah.
in our real lives. And
And
we're divorced from that.
not to hijack this conversation or make this political, but I read a statistic recently that 87% of people under 30 get their news from Facebook, which isn't regulated, and it's word of mouth. It's not even from journalists. I mean, the fact that people don't trust journalists but trust a stranger on the internet, it blows my mind. And I think it just plays into this instant gratification and just trust, blind faith of what they're seeing on their screen. And
Mm,
um again, I'm not immune to it. I'm part of this generation too, but like really having a reality check about what life feels like, what our nervous systems feel like. We've all been through a huge collective trauma, and more has come, right? It was COVID, and then it's been war after war after war, and every 100 years there's a pandemic. It's not new, but now we have got these screens, and we are not built to be this informed. Our nervous systems aren't prepared to have this many relationships and know this much about what's going on in all of our friends' lives. Our nervous systems just
mm,
are not built for it.
mm.
So we have to come up with ways to organize our daily life to match what we're capable of, what our bandwidth is, what our capacity is for all the stimulation.
And I feel like there has to be a detox period, because if you're not actively detoxing from it and getting yourself regulated again, then you're just going to pick up some other thing that is going to keep you from tuning in as
Yeah.
well.
One of the biggest headlines I remember from health coaching school was a phrase called crowding out. So instead of asking people to take unhealthy food out of their diet, add more healthy food in.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think this, just to your point, how do we nurture our lives more and cultivate healthier experiences for ourselves so that we are crowding out all the technology and all the overstimulation?
And it's so true. And we don't ever actually break a habit. We just create new ones.
Mm-hmm.
Just like what you just said. You have to add in the good, add in the different. I love that.
And
So
intuition is something that needs to be coming from a healthy nervous system. So the more we're
yes,
online, the less we can trust our intuition.
right, because yeah, yes. So what are some practices that you find help you, how did you say it, crowd out? Crowd.
Yeah, crowd out.
Yeah, I love that.
So, walking in the woods is my medicine. And
Mm,
anybody who knows me, if I miss a day of walking, something's off. It doesn't matter what the weather, I need to get outside. I
yeah,
probably go 363 days a year. I need a walk.
yeah.
So it takes a lot for me to not get out there. That is the way I regulate. It's the way I feel in my body. It's the way I feel like I can separate from external forces. It's like completely different experience being inside and outside for me. And I know I'm not alone. We're animals at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so, for those who aren't familiar with the nervous system regulation, it does work with the body, because the body is the thing that gets anxious, and we
Right.
need to treat our bodies like animals. Animals have ways of dealing with trauma in the moment. They'll shake and they'll move on.
Yes.
Humans need to do that too, but we haven't been taught that. So we will start to internalize it and hold that in our nervous system. So shaking and walking is a great way to regulate oneself.
And I think dancing too. Like
Yeah.
sometimes I replace my morning mindfulness practice with
Mhm.
dancing around my house. And it's just, and I think, you know, like you said, for you, walking in the woods is like your medicine. You need that. And we're all unique. So I agree. I think there are many people who would benefit from that. I know I always feel better when I'm out walking. But I think it's really important to honor what feels best for you, right? As to what helps you feel grounded and in your body.
Yeah, I think every indigenous culture I've studied has a component of dance and storytelling, which
Mm.
might be also why social media is so impactful, is because there's like story.
Oh, yes.
And right, food and cooking. So some people might feel their meditation in cutting vegetables, or like you said, dancing.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people really resonate with bathing. Like showers or baths feel like their meditative space.
Yes.
So, but whatever gets the body integrated into the moment.
Yeah.
And there's something else. Oh, I know. This answers the question you didn't ask, but you alluded to. As I was starting to really develop my more psychic gifts,
Mm.
I got really wrapped in New Age spirituality because it was enticing to me. I grew up in a secular Jewish family. So there wasn't talk about God. I wasn't forced an idea of what God was or if God even existed. So as I was kind of leaning more into indigenous culture and learning about herbalism and more sustainable things, that's when my spirituality started to bud. And
Mm.
New Age spirituality felt like the safe place to go. So I started getting interested in white witchcraft and tarot card reading, and I trained as a professional astrologer, and I thought all this stuff was really empowering, and it helped me develop my intuition. And what I've come to realize is it came with a price. It
Mm.
was dabbling in all these energies out there that were chaotic, and it was facilitating my need to know and my desire to have other people validate me or other tools validate me. And it didn't actually help with healing. It helped me learn a lot about myself. Astrology is accurate. Psychic information does come with validity. However, the price is needing more and seeking. That energy of seeking is dysfunctional, and needing to label,
Opposite of
identify.
surrender. Yeah. Yes.
And I found since I've cut it out, I'm a much more calm person. I'm a much more gifted coach. And I trust myself a lot more.
That's beautiful. I
And it's
love
an unpopular opinion. I've tried to share it in certain spiritual circles online, and it is not popular.
you
Um,
are correct because it's still and for better or worse, right? Like it's not for us to say, but I think people who solely rely on those techniques are, like you said, they're still seeking, and you can't, if you're always seeking, like you can't find something you think is lost. I
mhm.
have said, like, the word journey, I'm on my health journey, or I'm on my like that has always bothered me, because I'm like, well, then you're never done.
Yeah,
Not that we're ever done, but I feel like unless you can come from a place of wholeness, it
yeah,
just seems like you're just always reaching and you're never satisfied or,
yeah.
joyful. So,
Yeah, I'd agree with that. We're never done. Like there's always more room for growth and we always have blind areas, but the idea that we need to fix ourselves or that we're broken or that something is uncovered that's required to uncover for us to be at some stage can be really detrimental. And I have yet to meet somebody who is still using those practices and doesn't have some sort of mood fluctuation that is strong, you know?
I appreciate how you phrased that. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness. So, do you have any like specific examples of times when you've had intuitive hits? I know it's just part of who you are, but if you have any specific examples, that'd be great.
Yeah, like I said earlier, you don't always know until it's unfolded. Did I say that to you before or after we hit record?
Yeah, after that was part of, yeah.
Um, so uh looking back, I moved a lot around the country, and I'm from the East Coast, and I moved to California at first, and I think there was an earthquake back in Maine while I was there, and then I just had a feeling. Well, I moved from Northern California to Southern California, and there were a lot of fires happening, and I just felt like this was going to get worse and worse and worse. And as an environmentalist and as a geologist, I knew the science behind that, but I also felt a pending, like an urgency. And I moved out of Southern California to Kansas, and the place I was in just like lit up, and people had to evacuate. And I was like, good timing. And then in Kansas, I was worried about tornadoes. And then there was a tornado in Massachusetts, where I'm from
Yeah.
where is my home? And then I moved back to Massachusetts, and then I think there was like a major earthquake in Kansas, or a tornado or whatever, but it was interesting.
Yeah.
And again, detachment, it might just be coincidence, but I found it intriguing that there were these huge natural disasters in the areas I lived after I departed. You could also call it blind luck, but
Well,
you know,
no, but please continue. Yeah.
just I found that, you know, we all life is hard, and I think one of the things that people can be looking for in new age spirituality, or spirituality in general, is a fix or a comfort. And I'd say the goal is peace and regulation amidst any turmoil, but we are not going to get to this life of constant joy and contentment, and just manifestation after manifestation. And my specialty is manifestation. But I like to debunk a lot of the common myths, which is that, like, if you are a great manifester, you're going to have good luck every day and you should be living on high, which is a different kind of nervous system dysregulation. We really should be in the middle at balance. Um, and so I've noticed that I have had a lot of turmoil in my life, but now I'm able to handle it from a much more grounded and tolerant place. Whereas before it would just be like, I couldn't sleep, I'd stop eating. Like it was very tumultuous.
Mm-hmm.
So noticing, even in the moments where hardship is happening, seeing what can come out of it. And this is just a positive mindset, but I feel like it's also intuitive, knowing even if I'm going to make a decision and feeling like something might be off about it, and then finding out later, yeah, that was off, but there was purpose for it. There was learning from it.
Yes.
I did get something beneficial from the experience, even though it wasn't as pleasant as I'd prefer, or it wasn't as smooth as I'd prefer. There was. So for instance, I recently, well, not so recently, in October, hired somebody to do something for a 4-week contract. We're on month 5 and it hasn't been done. I had this feeling like something was off, but I knew that I was investing in it and I was going to learn from it. That was very clear.
Yeah.
So even though it didn't feel sparkly and inspiring and fluffy and nurturing, it felt like the right choice. And now I can look back and say, that's what that kind of wobble feeling was.
Yes.
Could I have made a better choice? Maybe. I made it with discernment. I made it with awareness. It hasn't been pleasant. I've learned a lot.
That's so true though. Like even when we decide to not listen to the nudge that's saying don't go this way, it just bolsters that knowing of like, okay, that's what it feels like for me when it's a no. So next
Yeah.
time I'll know better.
Yeah, it's so nuanced, because I felt like it wasn't a no, but it wasn't a fun choice. It wasn't the most just easy choice. It wasn't the most quickly productive choice. So I don't know that I should have said no. And this is where like the data collection is so important. And maybe the specificity of questions, right? Like I could have asked, is this no? Is this what's going to end up being the most productive in the long run? Or is this going to be productive in the short run? I could have gotten really specific with the questions, but I think like you said, it's kind of my lifestyle now. I'm just aware of it. And then I like sit back for the ride. And if I wanted to get more refined with it, I could. And to do that would be asking those really specific questions.
So true. Yes, I love that. Like a constant conversation with our guidance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So if someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
The best way is my website, which is my name, beccaspeert.com.
Okay, great.
And I provided you a link tree. I try to keep that up to date with my latest free offers. And I've got a workbook on Amazon. And I've got a group program that I'm relaunching that I'm really excited about called the Faith Frequency Incubator. And that is a spiritual experience for people to really deepen their relationship to God or redefine their relationship to God. A lot of people have a wounded relationship to God from their previous experiences. So reclaiming that or redefining it, and then learning how to tap into the energetics in ourselves and around us so that we can navigate life with a lot more discernment and empowerment and clarity. And then I work with clients one-on-one over Zoom or phone.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I really love your take on intuition and the balanced approach. I really appreciate that. That's great.
And it's so refreshing for me to talk to somebody who gets it and feels the same way. And I never feel like I've made it and I figured it all out. So this is where I'm at today. This is the clarity I have today. And it's always validating to talk to somebody else who sees it in a similar light and also has a really grounded way of speaking and communicating. And it's been a delight to hang out with you this morning.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. If you feel that this episode will help another woman, please share it. Until next time.